Okay, rolling?
Rolling.
Start.
Tapan, my observations will be, or reflections will be, not on specific movement, this and that and so on, but the flow of movements that have taken place.
Correct.
First of all, what is a movement, a people's movement? That means people are involved there. People who are affected by a particular issue or a situation, and they feel they need to do something about it, and they come together. And in the process of coming together, a natural leadership from among them emerges. And the importance of a collective leadership is important in a people's movement. This is how I have understood it. If you put that with regard to Jharkhand movements, we have had several movements, whole series of movements. We have had towering personalities, beginning with Birsa Munda, let alone Tilka Manjhi and others in the 20th century. Birsa Munda was there and wanted to lead a revolution against the British on the one hand and the very oppressive zamindari system that was there. And we cannot think of a more militant person than Birsa Munda. But at the end of it all, he did not really succeed in creating a movement. Birsa Munda was there, and they worshipped him. They even made him a Bhagwan, whereas we should be calling him a Veer, a hero, and not a Bhagwan. That's what the ruling class is making him to be. The moment you elevate somebody into the supernatural sphere, then he is no more with us. So, we have had very towering personalities like him. And later in history, we have had persons like Ramdayal Munda, a person not just son of the soil, but who vibrated with the life of his people, the culture, the social traditions of his people. And he also wanted to see that something could emerge in terms of a people's movement that would go on with him or without him. But that also did not succeed. And then he also tried at the politics level, or parliamentary democratic politics, wanted to stand in elections, and it was a failure.
Yes.
So, all these things point out to the fact that despite the fact that we have had very powerful, charismatic leaders all through history, real Jharkhandi people's movement has not really taken roots to the extent it would pave its own way towards a greater assertion of its rights. And so there we are. We have had so many movements, and yet it looks we have had no movements. That is the situation today. Even today there are some leaders. Some of them are more genuine, others not so genuine. And this is where the impact of so-called parliamentary democracy comes, the election comes, where money plays a big role. So, the impact has had, and so Jharkhandi leaders who have become MPs and MLAs, most of them have couldn't care less what is happening to their people. It is power and money and position. So, it has engulfed the whole process.
So, where do you think is the main source of the weakness? Is it because the movement also remained trapped in very limited objectives, like either get a state or get some rights on land and so on and so forth, and did not think in terms of the how to deal with or examine the nature of the Indian state with which it was fighting, and so where was this disconnect? Because it seems to have been completely co-opted by the Indian state.
Mm.
So there was, and where was the weakness in the movement?
And the weakness, you see, first we have on the part of the Adivasi society a beautiful culture of a people, self-sustaining economy, and a self-governance based on their own traditional leadership. That was there. Huh? But then when the capitalist economy comes in, and where private ownership becomes a primary thing, and if it is primary private ownership, then you have to make money and make more money. So the impact of the market comes in, capitalist market, for which people are not ready, were not ready, and even now they are not ready if you go into rural areas. But that has been imposed on a people. And this has weakened a people as a people. So in terms of the value system, maybe some elders in the interior villages, they may still carry on that same value with attitude towards the ancestors who are with them. Like Ramdayal Munda would say, when you are physically dead, you are not dead and gone. You are dead, but you are with us. That type of a spirit is not there. So, the impact of a so-called modern economy, which is capitalist economy, has been absolutely devastative with regard to the Adivasi system. And I'm sure you are aware of the very cherished values that the Adivasi people have lived by.
Yes.
They all have kind of watered down. And once your value system is watered down, then what type of a movement can you give birth to? Then it is again geared towards gaining power. And in a so-called democratic parliamentary democracy, you have to win elections and come to power. And once you come to power, you enter into another scale of values. So finally, there is hardly anything left of the Adivasiness, and it is superseded by the so-called modern society. So as such, the movements have not really been persistent in preserving the values and helping a people to struggle for their rights based on those values. I don't see it anymore.
So it is basically what we are seeing is a clash of, in a way, between two value systems. It's a clash of two kind of systems of economy: capitalism, the capitalist state, and versus the collectivist, ecology-based culture of the Adivasi. There is also a feeling at times one gets is that the Indian state actually looks upon the Adivasis as a colony, as an internal colony, and that is also a part of its total, the private property-based culture of capitalism. You've been experiencing, this over so many years. How do you see? I mean, is it how does it manifest? I mean, in your opinion, the attitude of the Indian state, which towards the Adivasis.
May I illustrate this with one example that kind of had a big impact on me. I was a very young person, as in formation as a Jesuit. I was teaching in a Hindi medium school in the tribal area in Chaibasa, Lupungotu. I used to spend my holidays with my students. I was also a hostel prefect. So with my students, I would go spend the holidays in living in their house and accepting their hospitality. Then I started to pursue to understand the cherished values of the Adivasi society. One morning, it was a summer time. We got up, went to the river, did our ablutions, came back. We sat on the pinda on the house with my young students. Then the father of the house, he had also gone to the river, he came back. There was a big mango tree in their yard, and it was mango season. So he looked up the tree and he called his son. He said, "Son, go up the tree, that branch, bring down the fruits." So he went up, brought down the fruits, nice ripe mangoes. So he gave us, we all ate. But there was one branch where there were some nice fruits. He did not ask his son to bring those fruits. I thought he did not notice. So I picked up courage and told him, look at that branch. He casually looked at it and he said, "Oh, they are for the birds of the air. Those fruits are for the birds of the air." So nature has what has given us freely. We share with nature. This kind of, I kind of performed a somersault in terms of my value system. That it can be like this. You share what nature has given you with nature. So deliberately you leave one whole branch for birds of the air. So I can cite many such examples. Then back to the school. Tuesday used to be the market day in Chaibasa. All the villages around would come there. Sometimes I would go with my boys to the market just to see. As we entered, Chaibasa has 4 or 5 entries. And Adivasis from the villages, they would bring something or other to the bazaar. It is also a social get-together, you are aware. Especially Adivasi women may not come empty-handed to the bazaar. They have to bring something, either some eggs or sabji or a chicken or a goat. You sell it and then buy what you need and go. I saw more than once Adivasi woman having a chicken under her arm. She would come towards the market. But before she would enter Chaibasa town, the dalals of the merchants, petty merchants, he would come and snatch the chicken from her. She would shout and yell, "Kanya, Kanya." That means, "I don't want to give, I don't want to give." But it will be taken. And then he'll throw a dirty 5 rupee note at her like that. He wouldn't even give her in his hand. At that time, her chicken would be worth 20-25 rupees. She was given 5 rupees, a dirty note thrown at her. Then I said, "My God, what is happening? Here are a people who cherish their values and sharing things with nature. And here is another value system which just exploits them and deprives them of our human dignity, human respect." So once I saw this, then I used to ask my boys who were with me, I said, "You see what is happening?" They say, "Haan, father, dekhte hain." But don't we do something about it? Kya kar sakte hain? It is at that juncture I said, I want to make something of my life for these people. What exactly that something would be, I did not know. I was very young. Afterwards, I had to go through many other years of Jesuit formation and so on. But finally, I stuck on to that dream. And the dream is still there with me. With all that has happened, with all that has gone through a center like Bagaita, we are trying to get people who are in struggle, struggling for their rights. We try to be in touch with them, bring them here, help them to understand without calling it socio-political analysis or a Marxian methods of analysis. We try to equip them to understand what is happening, why are things happening like this happening, who is responsible for this. And then develop certain strategies of action through which they can go back to their people, not with project, with money, but just as human beings, to be able to say, let us come, let us resist anything that is unjust that is being done to us. Tapan, one thing that has happened in Jharkhand with regard to displacement in the past 2 decades, it has not happened in the neighboring states of Chhattisgarh or Orissa. It has happened in Jharkhand because people like us, Meghnad and Sanjay and several other colleagues, what we did was people started to resist unjust displacement. So we tried to bring them together. We have succeeded, at least partially. We have brought together 60 to 70 groups who are resisting displacement in their own places under some umbrella organizations, two or three such organizations. And and express some mutual solidarity to each other. If you receive a notification saying that you have to vacate your village in the next 2 months, you will inform us. And all of us will come on a particular day you appoint and stand shoulder to shoulder with you and say, we will not move. So, jaan denge, zameen nahi denge is not an empty word. So, I myself have gone to several such situations, some of them of a very precarious nature. We were surrounded by armed police surrounding us, but things have to be done. So, this type of a resistance to unjust displacement and the land alienation has taken place and is going on even now. This is an achievement of the people which you and I must recognize.
So that is something
Yeah.
unique, because unfortunately the Jharkhand state, which was a state for the Adivasis,
Yes.
is in fact turned out to be very, very unsympathetic to the whole Adivasi issue, and is more interested in getting foreign investment and selling out the land of the Adivasi. So this resistance is a great news.
So, whether it is, we have had, I think, 6 or 7 Adivasi chief ministers during these 15 years. And for once, we have a non-Adivasi as the chief minister. Let that be. Whether it was an Adivasi or a non-Adivasi who have been on the realm of governance, they all have been sold to this capitalist system, where you think the more investment you get, the so-called development takes place. So they are being carried away, and in the process, is also to see how much money I can make in the process. So the whole game is there, is going on. Now, the way, what can, or maybe we hope what should happen is people are coming to a process of being disillusioned about their own so-called leadership, about the so-called political setup, so-called government, so-called local prashasan, the administration, the police. People are beginning to see them through and through for what they are. And the resistance will continue. And that's where the challenge for activists like us is, in what way, using whatever talent or whatever things we have, we can support such resistance movements. So that people as people, not looking up to big leaders, MP or MLA or this or that person, but counting on their own strength, and be ready to pay the cost. Because of this effort, consistent resistance to people's, to displacement and land alienation, 104 MOUs were signed by Jharkhand state with as many companies, but only about half a dozen of them have been able to open shop in Jharkhand. the big companies. And how did they do that? Either by cheating the people or by frightening them, threatening them. So, and people are beginning to see that through.
So the resistance has been quite successful in keeping the big companies out.
Yeah. Yes. Now, the resistance cannot be in a negative way. You are coming to take our land, so I am resisting. It is still a negative type of reaction. Now, people have to take one step further. That is where, like the 2013 Supreme Court judgment very briefly stated, the owner of the land is also the owner of the mineral, of the subsoil mineral in his land, which I think is a significant thing.
Yeah.
So people have to assert themselves and say, it's not just we will not give our land and then be displaced, but we are going to take the riches that is in our land.
Yeah.
This process has started in a very minuscule way, but we have to encourage to see that this kind of spreads like fire. These days, wherever I go, I take the Supreme Court judgment, I made it into a summary of a 2-page, just the basic points, and translated it into Hindi. I carry with me and I show them, look, here is a judgment. There is koila or loha or whatever it is, you assert your ownership. If anybody raises a question, show him the Supreme Court judgment. So, in some places, especially in Hazaribagh, in Karanpura area, which is a rich agricultural land, but it is also the subsoil coal.
Yeah.
So, NTPC is after that, and the government wants to give it, but people are resisting. They are not giving. So, it is not just resisting giving land to a company, but to say this land is ours and whatever riches there is, it is also ours and we have a right. So, people, Gram Sabhas have to do it. It cannot be done by individuals. Gram Sabha, again, based on the traditional leadership, the Munda Manki system. This is one way of reviving it. You see, the traditional system cannot be revived in the abstract. It can only be revived based on concrete achievement that is possible. Here is a possible situation. Like Sanjay and others, our friends are trying to help them to see their rights over the forest. It's not just because the government passed a law in 2006, so-called Forest Rights Act, that people have the rights. No, people have had the right all along. But now finally some recognition has come about. Okay, that's good. So we are not dependent on what laws the government will pass or will not pass, but go back to our roots, our traditions, and say this is how we related to nature. This is how we owned nature, not so much as individuals, but as a community. And we go back to that. So, several Gram Sabhas have started to do that. In some places, the local administration objected, so they showed the Supreme Court judgment. And those fellows had not even heard of such a judgment or seen that judgment. So, it is going on. This type of effort, if it becomes part of people's movement without wanting it to become a global movement, a movement that it takes in the whole of Jharkhand. But wherever people are, if they can start this type of a movement, asserting their right, nature-given rights, which is a predominant right over any other right given by any law or by any government or a court, based on their rights, if they can proceed, that I see as the only possibility by which our people can live as a people.
Thank you, Stan.